I'm Brandon Miller, and you are listening to Coach. This weekly series dives deep into the world of Clifton Strengths and how they impact your daily life. Hear from certified strengths coaches on the ins and outs, quirks, and characteristics of all 34 strengths and 4 domains and how they play out in real life. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Strengths Whisperer Season 2, Coach to Coach. Today we are talking about competition. Competition as a strength and certainly as something that we all understand our will and desire to win, have the first prize. But we're going to take it much deeper with our guest today, Sarah Robinson of Fresh Concepts, one of the first 7 Gallup-certified coaches in the world, is joining us today from Indianapolis. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. Always terrific to chat with you, but really excited about being on this particular podcast.
Awesome. So we get to talk about competition, but first let me tell people about what you're doing. So Fresh Concepts is the name of your company. freshconceptsonline.com is where you can find Sarah. She helps organizations, small to mid-size, increase employee engagement using a strengths-based approach. And 2 areas in particular that she works in are healthcare and business furniture. Sarah, what have you been up to lately as far as that kind of work? Anything exciting to tell us about?
Oh, thanks for asking. It's always fun helping small businesses reach their goals. And recently, I had the pleasure of helping an organization that had fallen off the best places to work list here in Indianapolis regain their status. And we did it the old-fashioned way by harnessing our strengths, getting people some coaching, and continuing to measure employee engagement. What's so interesting, Brandon, and I wonder if you've seen this too, is that there's some organizations out there that think that they can just measure without actually putting good practices into place and their engagement will change. But honestly, it's just like weighing yourself every day. If you don't change your diet and exercise plan, nothing's going to change. And guess what? It's more likely to get worse than better. So at any rate, it has been such a thrill to help them on this journey and super proud of the work that everyone has put in to make it happen. And it feeds my competition. I want my clients to be winners. So that works for me.
I so relate with you on that. I'm also high competition. And oh my gosh, the thrill of a win with a client when they aim for something like that, a best place to work recognition, which probably like you, I tell them, your employees won't lie. Those anonymous surveys, you get those to them. That's a lag metric. That's the consequential metric. That's not the daily hygiene that you need to do to get a nice report. That's what that's the back end. So really important work when we're helping someone regain their footing. So happy to hear you got that win.
Thanks so much. Super fun.
Sarah, you and I go back a ways, and we are talking about a strength that we both know. And you today are our expert guide through all things competition. And so I'm going to let you set the stage of what the strength is. And you can go in terms of personal anecdotes or stories. You could take us down whatever path makes the most sense. But let's start. Tell us about competition.
Thanks so much. I want to really shed this perspective of being a female with high competition, because that's a little different than maybe what you relate to, Brandon. And obviously, I'm a woman. And when I first got my results back, I wasn't really pleased. I thought that being a high competition woman meant that I was friendless. It meant that I was out to get other people, which I'm not. And I had negative associations with the term competition, other than being a star athlete, which I'm not. And that also threw me. I really took a while to get warmed up to the idea that it was actually a really positive thing for a woman to be highly competitive. And I know that that's different for most men. And I even see it as different. that it's okay for men to be super competitive, but I'm just now here as a fully adult woman embracing how great it is to be a competitive woman. So it's been a journey, is what I'm going to say. And one of the best things that I think strength gives everybody, regardless of where you enter in and find your strengths, is that idea of using your strengths as a pair of glasses. And that you can use your strengths and it's like, well, does that clarify what is going on with me right now? And that's really what I started doing with myself, trying to push back and say, okay, does this work? Am I really competitive? And all of a sudden, all the green lights start coming on. And I'm reflecting on the things that I'm most proud of. I'm reflecting on, and as you know, Brandon, my award-winning banana bread, my blue ribbon Indiana State Fair award-winning banana bread. And I thought about how just absolutely jubilant I was. Super surprised. The backstory, everybody, is that I did not want to even enter my banana bread into the Indiana State Fair. My husband did it behind my back. Total surprise to me. When he told me, I was upset. And I was upset because I didn't think I could win. And we know high competition people, we like to win. We want to have a sure thing. I thought this was a long shot. This is beyond a long shot. And so I didn't want to be in that ring. I did not want to step in the ring. I thought I'd be shot down and I'd be humiliated. So long story short, when we went to the Indiana State Fair and I saw that blue ribbon, my husband actually saw it before me. He threw his arms in the air, that universal sign for victory. And I almost passed out. I mean, I could not believe it. I was so shocked, but also I knew that women for years have been entering this before me, and they knew what they were doing. The key thing about competition is we want to know that we're up against other good people. When it doesn't feel like a full win or a win that's significant enough for us, then it feels a little hollow. And I'll tell you what, I did not feel hollow. I felt full. As we all know, getting a compliment or getting any type of reinforcement in your area of strength fills you up. And that's how I felt at that moment. Really, really filled up. And that was just one of the ways I was taking on and off my classes, thinking about other instances in my life where I was able to have a definitive win. And it's certainly, I think most of us have experienced this. There's so many opportunities in grade school and high school and college. There are many more competitions out there. And then we reach adulthood and things can get a little gray. What are the big wins? And I have to say, and I know you've probably experienced this too, Brandon, as an author, being able to complete a book felt like a win. And then it did become an Amazon bestseller, and that my first book, and that felt fantastic. The reality is it has to be something I care deeply about. And writing a book, my dad was in publishing for most of his career. As a kid, our house was always filled with books. The dictionary was one of the most prominent. It was one of those huge. I mean, does anybody even have a printed dictionary anymore in their house? Anyway, we had a huge one. So I was very proud of myself that I had joined that group of people that actually has published a book. And I still feel good about that. I'm happy about it. And I do think that's part of my competition. It's something that makes me me, and it feels like a win.
So when you think about coaching competition, so as a CliftonStrengths global expert, you have been at this longer than most, and you are, a practitioner. You're someone who knows the lexicon backwards, forwards. And so sometimes when we coach a strength we know well, we're a little biased, a little my side bias, but I think for most of us, that's what we work hard is to stay neutral, let the strength be the strength. So when you're coaching a competition, especially for our listeners today, there are coaches themselves, because I have heard it said from coaches that they can feel some level of intimidation or trepidation when they're approaching this strength. They feel as though it can be tough. And I'm curious, what you've learned in that regard, what you might share for our coaches to listen to as they think about supporting people who are dominant in this strength.
It's great. Such a good question. It's something, even when I'm asking myself, it's sometimes hard. But one of my favorite tools, and Brandon, I'm not sure, but I wonder if you use this as well, is asking my clients, whether they have competition or not, who's their model? Who's somebody that would help them better understand their own goals? I know that as a high competition person, having those stretch goals is really important, and having people that I want to emulate, and thinking, well, if we know that the grass always looks greener, we know that other people's lives always look more glamorous, and especially with social media, we're fraught with the kind of illusions of everybody else's perfect life. But when we look, what do we really want that others have achieved? And how can we align our own goals to be on that path? That's something that when I'm either working with somebody with competition or somebody who's just struggling to really find their way, they feel a little stuck, right? Kind of a play off my first book, Unstuck at Last. When you feel stuck, you need to switch things up. You got to change it. And you need to be thinking about, what is it that I really want that I'm not going after? Most of us have our own roadblocks that are much more derailing than anything else out there. It's our own mindset that is blocking our ability to get and achieve our goals that we're so interested in getting, but feeling powerless sometimes to do on our own. But I also think that's why everybody needs a coach, because sometimes we can't see our own way. Having a coach who can sometimes just, wow, it's all right there to me, because I'm not in the middle of it.
That's right. That's right. Listeners, today you're hearing from Sarah Robinson. Her company is Fresh Concepts. She is the best-selling author of Unstuck at Last. That's book 1. And book 2, can you tell our listeners?
Yeah, so Fresh Leadership, 5 Skills to Transform You and Your Team, is actually an acronym, Brandon. And it's, as you know, but our listeners certainly don't, is that for 17 years, I had a side hustle. My side hustle, as I was growing my business, was teaching a college course in organizational behavior, my passion. And I loved it. It also got me a lot of experience just talking on my feet and trying to keep people engaged with sometimes kind of dry material. At any rate, we kept coming back to the same 5 things, organizational behavior topics that are more relevant today, post COVID, than they ever have been. F is for feedback. More is more. If you're not telling me what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well, I'm not going to be engaged. I'm just going to think, Brandon, you don't care about me. You don't see me. You don't hear me. I don't show up for you. I need feedback. And good, bad, or otherwise, you got to give it to me. More is more. R is rewards. How are you rewarding people? Intrinsically and extrinsically, or is this all just about money and benefits? Because if it's just about money and benefits, too bad for you. You have lost this game. You need to be rewarding people internally. You need to have a mission that drives people, that speaks to them. You need to fill them up. E, engagement. You got to measure it. You can't just say, oh, no, that's for the big guys. No, that's for everybody. If you have more than 20 people at your organization, you need to be measuring engagement. But as you and I have said, also making sure that you have practices in place to increase it every single year. Those voices need to be heard. S, service. The old way of leading was people serve their leader. The new way of leading is absolutely the opposite, 180 degree. leaders serve other people. You need to be thinking, how can I develop my people? What do they need? How do I show up for them? H, you got to be a human being. Humans need to be real. Leaders are not invincible. They're human, just like the rest of us. Being able to talk about your ups and downs, knowing about the highs and lows of one's leader is wonderful. And becoming that real person, and I like the word vulnerable, lots of people don't, but that means the good and the bad. So that in a nutshell is Fresh Leadership. It's also an active learning tool for teams. Lots of questions at the end of every chapter to help people really dig through this on their own and then with their team.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Where can people find your books?
They're on Amazon or they're on my website. So either place.
freshconceptsonline.com. Sarah, let's talk about developing competition. So as we know well, a talent theme is simply a recurring pattern of thinking, feeling, or behaving. A lot of different outlets, a lot of different ways it can go. And competition, like all of its 33 siblings, can certainly have its best use, its highest application, and it can also base down to a way that is less than helpful. And so when you're coaching this or you're helping managers develop people on their team who might have this strength, what are some ways that you call this one up and help it to really become its best version?
What's the ring? What's the ring you want to start getting in? And one of the questions that I use to harness this with teams is, if your high competition person can start doing the research on who's our competition, who do we want to emulate, and what can we start doing to make ourselves look even shinier, look even better than that. What does that look like to us? If you're not researching that and you're just literally living in a void, that does not feed the competitive personality. That competitive personality cannot be in a void because that is just dull. They need to know, and they need the feedback of, where are we? Are we 50%? Are we at 30%? Are we at 75%? And what do we need to do to get to reach our 100% goal to be who we want to be? We're all on a developmental process. And that line always needs to be moving farther and farther out. You need to be getting better. If you're not getting better, you're dead in the water.
I want to mention how much I appreciate that in terms of being a competitor myself. If I don't know who we're competing against and how we define a win and the sizing up of the competitors, even if they don't know they're competing with me, if I know that there is very clearly a way to measure an outcome, then all of the other strengths come to serve competition. Everything comes behind it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing, Brandon, I know, you and I both have kids and have tried to nurture the strengths of our children, and so just talking about this from how do you nurture it, not just in a team, but also in children and also adults, is, okay, where can we get the small wins that start building to something else? So I know you and I both have children that have been in public speaking and have won awards. I had my oldest son started doing mock trial not until college, and just, he is a high competition guy, and it filled him up. He's now a trial lawyer. He gets to do that as his occupation. And those small wins really led to his meaningful career path. But trying to give your high competition child exposure to a variety of areas where they may or may not excel is really powerful. So is it that they're competitive, in an artistic way? Are they competitive in a financial way? Or even, an emotional way. It's the idea of you can be a competitive woo, right? And if that person really wants to have as many connections as possible, they need to probably be in some sort of social media, profession. And, combining in that way or just exposure to a variety of small competitions. What's something you're interested in? Okay, then, maybe it's fishing. Who knows, right? Okay, let's go get the biggest bass out there.
I found in coaching with this particular strength is I encourage managers to be aware that you want your competitor on your team, not against you.
No doubt.
And if you're not careful, because this strength it will find an outlet. It will find a contest to go with the competition. And if you don't have it on your team, you're going to find yourself competing against your own team member. They will start to turn your team into a space where that's where they're competing now with the other team members. And healthy competition is good even on an intact team. However, you might really want that pointed toward the outcome that you're aiming toward. And if you're in a company that has an organization that has clear competitors, then that energy definitely wanted on your team. And so I have found with leaders when we coach them with people with high competition is you're really, as you said so well earlier, you mentioned that we like to win and we like a sure thing. So we like to know that it's set up for us to be successful. That really catches a competitor's interest. They don't mind worthy opponents. I found, really strong competitors, the more worthy, the better. That makes the win that much sweeter.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. And that is actually part of Gallup's definition is that it has to be a worthy win. And being enrolled in something difficult and the stretch goal for the high competition person is, just where the beauty is. We want that stretch goal because when it's less than that, it feels like, yeah, that was too easy. Gosh darn it, right? And that's both a blessing and a curse, right? Because we have to constantly be pushing ourselves. And it really is about our own evaluation of self. It really doesn't have to do with anything outside. Somebody else could say, oh, but that was so great. And I would know internally it really wasn't my best. So it kind of feels like a pity compliment. You know what that is? You feel like, oh, you're complimenting me, but that's not really real. So it doesn't fill you up. It's a blessing and a curse, right? It's a great thing because it stretches us and encourages us to take on just a little bit more. And I try to do that with my clients too. And as you and I both know, growth it needs to be safe but not comfortable. The stretch is the right term because if you're stretching well, you're not hurting yourself, but you're kind of ready to stop if you're stretching enough, right?
As a resource for our listeners, we have a document called How to Be a Good Teammate to Me. And it's the contributions and needs of the 34 strengths. And in each of them, we might highlight a contribution or need. In this particular one, I go right to the needs because something about competition where there is a need to best my best, right? To better my best. And competitors will absolutely have drive and intrinsic self-motivation to keep being a better version of self. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that. You're like me, we're 11 years post our certification. So we had a really nice run up for a short season there before the market. Now there's 30,000 trained Gallup strengths coaches in the world. We get to come back and go, we were one of the first 7 and we got that season. But if we don't keep getting better, the reality of relevance starts to set in, right? It's, well, you were the quick find on Google for quite a while, and you were getting found on a directory for a while, and now, woo, there's saturation. So speak about that for a little bit, about just in your own craft, your own world, what that's like as a competitor inside of yourself?
Oh, well, I feel like we don't have enough time for this question, Brandon, but I will say this is that again, it's the blessing and the curse. Thinking about where I'm really helping people is where it has to ultimately that's judgment day, right? Judgment day is who am I helping? And are the organizations that I'm working with getting better? And what have they learned from interacting with me, either individual coaching or team coaching or, keynotes that I'm giving? All of those things do add up, and you don't get immediate feedback. Sometimes it takes years for someone to say, I just had a very old client ask for new work. He's now at a totally different organization. And he's like, oh, I still think about that activity you had me doing with Elizabeth, and that shed so much light on what was happening. And again, wow, you've got me. That was like, thank you. That's what I need to hear as a coach. The impact that you're having on many different levels, you really do need to stay the course, because sometimes it can on the dark days it can seem a bit invisible. Am I showing up for people? Am I making an impact? And sometimes I just have to go, this is kind of sad. Don't be sad for me. Well, maybe a little bit. uh, if I really need a good pick me up, I'll go and read my old reviews of my books, because they are so touching. So I'm like, okay, well, all is not lost. There are a couple things I've done okay.
I think it's important that we wrap on this point, because I think it's so important to competition, and it's the reality of losing and its impact on a competitor. Because two of my children are number one. Actually, I take it back. Three of my children are number one competition. 3 of 7. And
That's highly unusual.
right, I know. And as a high competitor myself, I know that loss is hard. Losing is hard. And when you are one, there's a way that you must, and you said it so well, how do you come back from it? How do you make the bounce back? And I'm not just talking about winning a race. I mean, you've lost in life. You've suffered loss. Something didn't work. You lost an account, a relationship. You lost something. Competitors take that they are very hard on self. I mean, I like to say in some of these strengths, no one can be a harsher critic than them to themselves, right?
Oh, no one.
And this strength can be brutal to self on loss.
I'm the world's meanest boss, but only to myself.
And so let's speak for a moment on that. How do we help people bounce back from that? And then how do we help people realize that the competitor has to bounce back on their own? There's only so much you can do for them, because their comeback lives in them. They can't be talked into it, walked into it, convinced into it. They have to get there on their own.
Absolutely. And so I do recommend the things that help me, which is the mourning period. Everybody gets a mourning period. Give yourself a little time to mourn the loss, whether it's something that an account you lost, or it's a relationship has kind of gone kaput. There are a million different ways you can think about it, but the reality is, at some point, you need to assess it, and then you need to say, what went wrong there? Right? What role did I play in this? Was this just a complete fluke? So there's going to be a little bit of both in lots of different situations, but being honest with yourself and learning and getting better is the only way to really take it as you should as a highly competitive person. What am I going to do better next time? How can I write the path so that if I'm being my own worst enemy, right? If there are things that I am actually physically doing or verbally saying that are causing me to fail, how do I reroute myself? So I think in general, the morning period, and actually, but also give time limit. Can't go on for very long. But some minor things, it's going to be a day or an hour, and other things I'm going to say, okay, yeah, you can have 10 days for this. I get this. But at the end of it, we're going to really talk about what now? What does this mean and why? And there has to be a learning and a movement forward, or then you're still stuck.
You said a key word there. As a coach, I still coach football, and this last year, told our team, look, when you suffer a loss, and every team's going to lose at some point, somewhere along the way, and this team that had lost, I said you could accept it for what it is, and be dejected because you lost on the scoreboard, or you can accept it as a learning opportunity. And so you take the learn over the loss. And for high competitors, that sounds fine, but they still have to do the first thing you said. They got to mourn the loss, and you have permission to mourn that you lost. Your effort against their effort in this contest or in that time period, you came out the loser. Now, can you turn it into a learned? Can you grow from it? And I think I agree with you. It's such a development opportunity, because when you're a leader or a manager of someone with the strength, or self-guiding, or coaching it, if you can get them to the learn, whoa, do you have a motivated learner? You can see major progress in a short amount of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, listeners, we have come to the conclusion of today's episode on competition. Sarah Robinson, freshconceptsonline.com, author of Unstuck at Last and Fresh Leadership, that you can find on the website or on Amazon. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today.
Brandon, always a pleasure to chat with you, and nothing better than chatting with somebody else with competition who totally gets it. So thanks so much.
Thank you. And listeners, if you would like to get a copy of How to Be a Great Teammate to me, please email Brandon at 34strong.com. We'll get you a copy of that. Great to use with your own development or with your team. And with that, listeners, thank you again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Coach to Coach.
Thank you for tuning in to the Strengths Whisperer Coach to Coach. Please feel free to reach out to Brandon to partner with 34 Strong for collaboration opportunities to serve your employees or clients together. If you are a strengths coach, lead a strengths-based team, or are a fan of strength, we invite you to receive our complimentary resource, How to Be a Good Teammate to Me, Understanding My Contributions and Needs. Email Brandon_Miller at 34strong.com to connect, and he will gladly share this resource that will continue to unlock the power of strength.